Hello, hello, hello. It is me, your True Hill Phenom, SP3. We are live on the True Hill Heat, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter for a special exclusive interview, True Heels BTR, Between the Ropes, with former WWE star, NXT standout. I saw his career over in Ring of Honor about 10 years ago. My main man here, Donovan Dijak. How are you doing?
Good, dude. How are you?
I am very well, very well. Like I said, I've been a huge fan. I said that in the first email that I sent you. I remember you in the top prospect tournament back in your Ring of Honor days. So I've followed your career for a very long time. Very excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for the support. Yeah, I mean the top prospect tournament feels like it was yesterday, but obviously it was not. We're coming up on, gosh, I guess about 9 years, right? A little more than
Yeah.
9 years. We're almost at 10 years now. So yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, but a wild ride for sure.
What do you remember from those like Ring of Honor days? Like you said, it's we're going on 9 years, but like feels yeah. I always say with the pandemic, it feels like 2 decades ago.
Right. Yeah, it does. It really feels like a lifetime. I remember that in and of itself was kind of a blur, just because there was a lot of I wouldn't say it was like I mean, yeah, no, it was surprises, really, because it's the sort of thing where you find out that you're in the top prospect tournament at the same time as everybody else. I don't think it was, maybe it was told to me like a week or two before that. I don't remember exactly. Again, we're talking about 10 years ago, so I might have got an email a little bit in advance. And then you find out you're booking. I didn't find out I was winning the top prospect tournament until that night. I remember that night we were told, and it was a Ring of Honor, so it was a television taping. So
Yeah.
I think I had two matches in one night, or two matches in a couple of days. So it all kind of happened really quickly. And then the winner of that was supposed to get like a TV title shot, and I knew the TV champion at that point was Jay Lethal. So I was super excited about that, but it ended up not happening, and I ended up joining the House of Truth instead, which I always thought was um I'll be honest, I wasn't thrilled about that decision because I really wanted to wrestle Jay Lethal. But they were putting me in a stable with him, which was like, okay. And then I found out I was in a tag team, and I was like, all right, that's not ideal, like not an ideal begin. I think what ended up happening, if I had to guess, what ended up happening is they did the booking, right? And they decided all those things. But Dalton Castle was in the top prospect tournament as well. And obviously
Yeah.
since I was the winner, he was not the winner. So he had to lose at some point. He and I never faced in the top prospect tournament. But what happened was he came out and he got so over, even though he lost. I think that they probably shifted course and said, we're just gonna give him the the push that we were gonna give Dijak instead, and they ended up doing that. They had I joined the House of Truth. He came out and immediately challenged for the TV title. He had the
Yeah.
match with Jay Lethal. He ended up being in the Ring of Honor World Champion. So I don't know if all that was planned for me. Nobody told me that, but like that would be an easy trade, right? If that's what they decided, if they watched the whole thing and just said, "Yeah, this guy's more over than this guy." It's not like he wasn't, right. Like he
No,
did a
no.
good job. I was a bad guy. He was a good guy. So the reaction for him was obviously bigger. And Jay Lethal was a bad guy too at that point. So yeah, I mean it makes sense, but I wasn't a fan of that decision making. But ultimately, I was happy at the point just to be in Ring of Honor, right? Because it was the first time I'd ever done anything on any sort of national stage. So I was just happy to be there, really.
Yeah, like I said, like that's when I first discovered your work. But that kind of that it was what you were with Ring of Honor for about like 2, 3 years, was it? Like I know you got signed to WWE back in like 2017. So how do you kind of like think that Ring of Honor like spot that you got, working with House of Truth, working with Jay Lethal so closely in the same stable, how did that get kind of people's attention in WWE? Do you think that had a part to play besides like the other stuff you're doing all across like PWG, Evolve as well. But that time in Ring of Honor, how did you think that parlayed into your time in WWE?
Yeah, I think it played a role. It was about 2 years, the beginning of 2015 to the beginning of 2017. I think it played a role for sure. Maybe I don't know that anybody actually like sits down and watches that stuff per se. I think they're just generally aware of it. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe at that time it was William Regal, right? I don't know
Yeah.
who it is now. Maybe it's still Regal since he left and came back. They don't really like advertise that too much in terms of who does the quote unquote recruiting for WWE. But yeah, I knew that Regal was kind of that guy in terms of the indies at that point. He was doing a seminar at the school that I'm currently a trainer at and that I was training at that point, but I was on my honeymoon because I just got married to my wife. So the dates didn't match up and I couldn't go to the seminar, but I wanted to talk to him because I knew my Ring of Honor contract was coming up. So I reached out to him and emailed him, and that kind of got the ball rolling in terms of their interest. Do I think being in Ring of Honor helped? Yeah, I think that they were aware that I was in Ring of Honor. It's not like I had a bunch of marquee matches, right? You know, I had great matchups. Don't get me wrong. In terms of using them to build me in terms of my status as a wrestler and my in-ring especially, you know, I got to wrestle most of which were on like house shows or TV or whatever. You know, I only had like 2 or 3 pay-per-view appearances, but still, you know, I had pay-per-view appearances and they were against excellent opponents like, you know, Mark Briscoe and I got to team with the Motor City Machine Guns. So you know, there was plenty of good stuff there, but a lot of the really meatier matchups were like AJ Styles. I got to wrestle AJ Styles. I got to wrestle Jay Lethal on TV. I got to uh, wrestle the Young Bucks. You know, pretty much everybody in the roster. Adam Page, Kyle O'Reilly, Bobby Fish. Bobby Fish was on pay-per-view, so that was a good matchup for me. It was in Lowell too. There was a litany of great matches and great opportunities for me in Ring of Honor. But you know, when the time came for me to make a decision, you know, between Ring of Honor and WWE, my goal was always WWE. I don't think I was ever shy about that. I don't think I ever lied in any capacity. The interesting part of it is that the real bare bones of AEW was kind of beginning to form at that point. So it felt like maybe there was a bit of a trend in that direction in terms of like nobody said this to me, right? Nobody, but just kind of the feeling that I got was like, hey, we'd love you to sort of stick around, and we've got some big things on the horizon. And it turns out they did, right? It turns
Yeah.
out that that kind of got the ball rolling on all of that. You know, in my head at the time, I sort of questioned that, and it was more of like a, well, if you're being this vague about it, then there's probably not a lot set in stone, and you're not really offering me much in terms of like money or creative direction or anything like that. So I was like, WWE at that time was big on big guys and stuff like that, and they kind of liked indie guys too. And I was like, well, I'm the best of both worlds, so let me try my hand there. And I ended up there for 7 years. And you know, it had its peaks and valleys and stuff, but yeah, that's kind of how Ring of Honor played its role in my development.
Yeah, like I said, I enjoyed your work there. I definitely enjoyed your work in WWE. But the reason why I went, and reached out to you is because you had this big post on June 27th announcing that your WWE departure was the following day on June 28th. And I kind of compared it to like the Cody Rhodes letter that he put out when he was leaving WWE. And it really got a lot of buzz with the people online, wrestling fans and wrestling companies throughout the world. What what was kind of your mind process as far as putting out that post, and what did you kind of think the reaction would be from the fans and everyone else?
But obviously Cody's thing played a role, right? That this is a guy who I was in communication with him at the end of his run as Stardust. And as he made that post, and then he showed up on the indies, and I think the second indie that he was on was a show that I was on. So we got to meet in person, and we wrestled each other a ton of times, and we were on the road together quite a bit. So yeah, that was certainly an influence, because it felt like it wasn't the same story, right? But it felt like a similar path, in that obviously he chose his. Mine was not a choice. I didn't choose that. I might have chosen that, depending the circumstances. I don't know. The conversations that I wanted to have with WWE were less about negotiating money and more about my worth as a talent, right? Because I I I was at a point where it was like I got called up to Raw, and it's like, okay, we did all this, we revamped the character, we recreated. Now it's time. Everybody in charge knows what I can do. They all know that I'm ready and hungry to prove myself and all this stuff. So I was just kind of biding my time, waiting for that to happen. I'm like, all right, I'm called up. Maybe this will happen, and then we can talk about the money, and then we can figure something out, and we'll be off to the races. Well, then it didn't happen, right? I was on Raw, and I wasn't booked, and I'm just kind of sitting there. So then it became less about figuring out a contract and more about figuring out my status. I was like, all right, I'm going to use these negotiations as a time to be like, look, I'm trying to figure out where I fit in this vision. Like, if you guys feel like there's opportunity for upward mobility for me, then I'm happy to you know just kind of be where I was on NXT, which is guy in the middle who sometimes floats to the top. But if you tell me that if I knock it out of the park every single time, then I promise I'll knock it out of the park every single time. And then if you tell me that'll get me in the mix at the top of the card, and I can one day be a top guy, and I can one day main event the pay-per-views and stuff, then fine. I can still do this for at a high level, probably for like 8, 9, 10 years, depending on how my body is. So listen, I got time to prove myself. I'm happy to do that. If we sit down and have a conversation with the creative powers that be, and you tell me that there is an opportunity to prove myself, then I'm happy to do that. Unfortunately, we never had the opportunity for that conversation, because I don't know if they got stuck on money or what, because I was never given an explanation. But those conversations never happened in any capacity. So I don't know whether if they had made me an offer, if I'd still be there. But a lot of it would have leaned on the answer I would have got in those creative discussions. Because if at the end of the day, this, and people don't want to accept that as real, accept what I'm about to say as reality. But the fact of the matter is, this is 100% reality. And I respect it, honestly. I do. They might have looked at me and said, we're sorry, here's where we see you, and we'd like to pay you this amount of money, but you're going to be in this position, and that's pretty much it. We're really not looking for a guy who has really good matches right now, and that's pretty much all we see from you, in terms of the top of the card. But we're happy to keep you in the middle of the card, and we'll just that's kind of where you'll float. And if they had told me that, I would have said, thank you so much, this is a wonderful opportunity, this was a generous offer, I really appreciate it. Right now, at the stage of my career, I feel like I'm worthy of being a top guy, so I'm gonna go seek a place that will offer me that possibility, because I don't need it guaranteed in stone. I just need the opportunity. But thank you so much for everything. And that's what it would have been. If we just had that conversation, that's what it would have been. There would have been no note. There would have been no disappointment on my half. I just would have been like, this is what I want to do. This is what, and then it would have been very similar to Cody. Still not the same thing, right? Because Cody was, again, he was put in a position where he had to be Stardust, which I guess is in the same vein as T-Bar, but also he was Cody Rhodes. We're talking about a guy who main evented main roster pay-per-views against D-Generation X and Hell in a Cell. So he had much more name value than me. He was a former Intercontinental Championship. I never even got to perform under my real name on the main roster. So it's apples to oranges in a sense. But yeah, that's kind of the motivation behind like the content of the letter is I felt like I just wanted to have a conversation with someone, and they, it didn't happen. Not that they owed me that conversation. I just felt like I had put myself in a position over 7 years where I wanted to have that conversation, but unfortunately it never happened. So I kind of settled on this letter because I felt like people deserve to hear the truth, right? And the truth isn't always amazing. It's not always a super positive thing. In this instance, it wasn't a super positive thing. More than anything, I felt disappointed. The reception to the letter was obviously, I'd say it was like overwhelming, right? Because there wasn't a ton of like positivity per se. It was more like, what is happening? Why is this? There's a lot of confusion almost. A lot of people at that point were critical of WWE, which I'm not. I wasn't. My goal wasn't to create this picture that WWE was this horrible place. It wasn't. I never said it was a horrible place. I said I was thankful. So I liked my time in WWE. I was also disappointed, mostly with how it ended, and excited for the future. Other than that, I just told the truth. I mean, those were the only like opinions that I had. But yeah, some people were super critical of WWE. Some people were super critical of me. It feels like it's trending in that direction now, where people feel like I'm just constantly complaining about everything, which I'm not. Obviously, I've. What happens is I do these interviews, right, and I say the truth, and then somebody grabs a sentence or two from it and clips it and says, "This is what he said," and then it feels like I'm just offering these things as opposed to being asked a question and answering it honestly and with a lot of depth and with a lot of context and things like that all get left out of the equation when you just see two sentences that says Dijak was disappointed, right? Like I've and then they're like, oh, this guy's bitching again. All he does is bitch. Here comes Ryback 2.0. And I'm like, okay, well, you guys aren't. Nobody's seeing the full interview. Nobody's getting the full context of it. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say fully. And honestly, that's okay, right? You don't have to care about me anymore. If your thing is you're a WWE fan and you just get home from a long day of work and you sit down on the couch and you turn on WWE and that's your escape from reality, you probably don't want to hear much from me. You probably want me to vanish off the face of the earth, right? Because all I am is a reminder of some of the disappointing things that happen in WWE in terms of like real life contract negotiations. You don't want to hear about that. You just want to turn on the television and zone out and watch your underwear fighting, and that's fine. If that's what you like to do, that's fine, and I understand why you don't want to hear from me anymore. I don't think you need to go online and like let everyone know how upset you are about my existence and how you think that I won't shut up and how I think that's a bit much, but I understand the sentiment. I really do, and honestly, it's fine. It's not the majority of people. The majority of people are happy for me, but I do feel a lot of the presence and pressure of people who are just looking for a reason to put me in the wrong or to put me paint me in a light that I'm this negative bitter person, but I'm not a negative bitter person. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. I'm not going to give a bunch of names, and if someone asks my opinion, I'm going to give my opinion of the things that I think may or may not have happened, but I always give it with the context that I don't know for sure and I might be wrong. But a lot of the time that gets left out and it just seems like I'm on a big bitch fest. So I'm not. I'm happy. Things are going well. I have a ton of creative freedom. I have a ton of freedom in my life to kind of take off days that I used to not be able to take off. So overall, I'm very happy and I'm very excited for the future, and I'm very thankful for what was given to me in WWE overall.
And you talk about, hearing the noise from, one side of the kind of pro WWE or just anti anything like that. But you kind of, I love the fact that you put the letter on social media, because I know a lot of like fans that aren't WWE fans that really just know of you from your social media game, and the fact, the ratio and all of that. What kind of started that, like, making that connection with the fans on social media and the ratio of it all? Because I have a friend, Jimmy Macaram, shout outs to you. He said, he's like, oh, you're talking about ratio. When I said, oh, I'm interviewing Donovan Dijak, he's like, oh, you talk about ratio. So where did that all start, and how did you create that connection?
Yeah, so a lot of that began. I've always been a big believer in trying to give the people the most genuine version of the television character in a lot of senses. So anytime I've been given a character, right, I always dive headfirst into that character, and I present myself as such, in public as much as I can, in interviews as much as I can, on social media as much as I can, within the realm of that character, right? Um, and honestly, what happens in WWE is you do that. And so if I'm like tweeting in character, like you can look at my first, I don't know, probably 100 tweets as Dominic Dijakovic or as T-Bar and as just Dijak. And they're all probably very much in character, right? In terms of like I'm seeking justice, or if I'm T-Bar, it's like we're going to destroy the WWE, stuff like that. Because I don't want there to be a tremendous disconnect between the fan base and the product that they're watching. I don't want them to log on to Twitter and see me like cooking eggs in my house or whatever. Um, so kind of what happens naturally, at least for me in WWE over the course of time, is I am either given this character or I'm part of creating the concept of these characters, and then it gets booked over time, right? And at first, the character is like, I'm going to destroy the company, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm seeking justice, I'm going to bring those to justice, I'm going to whatever the character is. With Dominic Dijakovic, it was like, I'm all for my family, I'm sticking up for my country, this, that, and the other thing. What continuously happened with me in WWE is we would present that, and that'd be the character, and then it would very quickly run its course, mostly because when you present something like that and it doesn't get founded in the booking, then there starts to become a disconnect with the fans, right? So like T-Bar, for example, I'm going to destroy the company, we're going to take this place over, we're going to this, that, and the other thing, we're going to beat everyone, we're going to destroy this place, we're going to burn it to the ground. Well, after 4 months, that didn't happen. Right? Dominic Dijakovic, same thing. I'm going to do this for my family, I'm going to win for my family, I'm going to bring championship gold home to Croatia, whatever. 4 or 5 months go by, that didn't happen. I didn't win championships, I wasn't winning anything for my family. Dijak, same thing. I'm going to bring this guy to justice. Tony D'Angelo, he's going to pay for this. Wesley, you're going to pay for your. None of them did. They all beat me. So I mean, I'm not complaining about that, right? Yeah. That's just reality. That's what happened. So I need to adjust that character, because if I just say the same stuff, then it's like, shut up, dude. Like, what are you talking about? You're not bringing anyone to justice. You're an idiot. So what always happens with these characters is I have to kind of pivot on social media and just go back to myself, because myself is just a separate self-deprecating shit poster. That's all I end up doing. So T-Bar always devolves into like, hey, check out my Bane mask, and Dijak just evolves into like, hey, I'm gonna ratio you, like you're all more, whatever thing. And the more I did that, especially as Dijak, and the third one, the more people that started to gravitate towards it, because they're like, hey, this guy's pretty funny, even though he's a big dork, it's, we kind of like that, and it's whatever. So the ratio stuff specifically started when I saw a post that was about NXT Underground. It was right at the beginning of this year, like January 1st, I think, and they posted it. Now I always saw those posts because it's like one of those like 3 or 4 day after posts where it's just recapping what happened earlier in the week. And I was like, these never do any traction. They never do any good numbers. I usually just retweet it and move on. So I was like, instead of retweeting, I'm just going to reply to it and say something that I feel like can generate some extra views for this. So I was like, I said something to the effect of, I'm totally paraphrasing, but I said something to the effect of like, nobody cares about this post, and I'm just going to see if I can ratio it. And I did. It's people were like, they thought that was funny, so they all liked it, and it ended up doing like twice as many. But the thing that I noticed about it right away was that when I did that, the original post got like twice or three times as many likes. So I was like, oh, I should do this more often. Why don't I do this all the time? And the social media team got back to me, a couple months later, and they were like, yeah, it was great. Just keep doing it, because it gets us a bunch of views, and it gets you a bunch of views, and everybody thinks it's funny. So just keep doing that. And then the creative team told me a couple months after that, they're like, hey, you on Twitter is way more interesting than you as like Justice Vigilante guy. And I'm like, cool. So I'll just, I'm just going to continue to be myself and bring that into the realm of the character, right? Because you can keep the presentation of the character without it being that verbatim. Like John Cena still comes out to himself doing rap music, and he kind of looks like a rapper, but he doesn't like start rapping when he gets on the mic anymore. No, I mean, occasionally he'll break it out, but like for the most part, he's just being himself under the guise of that character. Undertaker, same thing. He doesn't come out with he did for most of the group, but even now he comes out and it's like, hey, it's the Undertaker, but then he talks like himself and he talks about normal stuff. So that's kind of the way that pro wrestling has been trending. So I kind of like that. And I'm like, I'm going to keep the vigilante presentation. I'm going to do the same stuff. The vignettes will kind of be in that air. But for the most part, when I get to talk, especially when I'm on the microphone in the ring, I'm just going to start kind of being more of myself. And you got a lot of that. And that started to translate quickly with the fans, right? Because you can look back, and in like February or March, I'm with Ilya in the ring, and they're booing the hell out of me. And then like a month later, I was getting big reactions and again, it's just the PC crowd. It's like the same 300 people or whatever every time, but you could feel it start to translate into the bigger arenas. Like the Stand and Deliver arena was starting to really get behind me. I think a lot of those people I know a lot of those people wanted me to win the North American Championship, because I could not only hear them, but they told me after, like, oh man, we really wanted you to win. And part of that is just the piece of like, we're there live and we want to see a title change, right? But part of it was people really getting behind me. I did the thing at the end, the Feast Your Eyes. I didn't expect everybody to remember that from 5 years ago, but they all did. The whole place said it with me. And I think at that point, a lot of them wanted to see me win the championship. And I'm not criticizing the booking, right? Like, but Femi is obviously tremendous and he's taken off. And a lot of that has to do with the championship and the undefeated streak. So I understand building a young guy. I do. I'm not like against that. I'm saying what the reality of the situation was. And I think people were gravitating towards me because of the honesty, because of the humor, because of stuff like that. So I'm going to try my best to keep it going. Right now we're in a space where it's like, I think a lot of people are looking for a reason to to dislike me, and I get that. Like I alluded to earlier, I understand that, and that makes complete sense. And if I'm a reminder to you of some of the things that you don't want to be reminded about, then please, by all means, unfollow me and stay off Twitter and whatever you need to do, because I get that. I do. I really understand that part of it. But I'm me, and I need to live my life, and I need to tell my truths, and I'm going to continue to do it, and I'm going to do it in the most positive way that I know how, and I'm going to do it in the most honest way I know how. And if that comes off as me being bitter and bitching and complaining, then you can interpret it however you'd like. But I'm telling you just firsthand that I'm not bitching, I'm not bitter, I'm not complaining. I watched NXT last night. I watched AEW last week. I'm going to watch all of it. I am friends with all these people. I support all of these people. I want all of them to succeed and do well and make money. And I want fans to tune in and watch whatever they want. And I've always felt that way. Even if my comments as T-Bar, the anarchist, said otherwise, right? Like a part of that was in character, right? Because we were in those phases of, but I understand how things can get taken, and I understand all of that. So I'm not angry at anyone for their opinions. I want everyone to kind of understand where I'm coming from.
100% understand. And for everyone watching, remember, drop the thumbs up on the video. You can send a super chat donation if you got a question for Dijak here. I see we already got one. I'll be reading those out at the end here. But I wanted to kind of, you talked about how kind of you are showing more of your personality in that, you know, the final couple of months in NXT. And I would say that your final run in NXT is some of your best work of your career since I've been following it for the past decade. How did kind of the vigilante justice character come to be, and kind of explain kind of your creative process working with Shawn Michaels in comparison to your original run with NXT, working with somebody like Triple H, who was in charge back then?
Yeah. So it's funny doing these interviews. I've tried not to say too many names and be too critical of people. One guy I have been a little more upfront about is Vince. Frankly, because he deserves it. So people might not like this answer, but again, I'm going to be as upfront and truthful as possible. The origin and the genesis of this character began with a conversation with Vince McMahon. You know, to his credit, I suppose, for all the other stuff he did, at the end of the day, he did have a creative mind for professional wrestling. Nobody can deny that. Did it end up paying off or panning out under his watch? No, it did not. I was given very little opportunity in that department under his watch. But you know, the originally what happened is it's around WrestleMania of 2022, right? So it's April or May or something like that. And I've made a number of pitches to him personally. I've had a number of conversations with him. Finally, I sit down. I know we have, 20 or 30 minutes before Raw starts. So I sit down with him and I say, look, I want to know what you need from me because I believe I can be a top guy for you in this company. And so he started just asking me questions about my background, what my interests are, who am I as a person, all this other stuff. So in that, we probably talked for 20 minutes. And in that conversation, I brought up the fact that I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in criminal justice. And I told him about my interest in film and acting. And some of my favorite movies are the movie Seven and Sin City and these sort of crime-based dramas. And he told me basically the summary of that whole conversation was there's something interesting with you about the criminal mind. So if we can do something in that aspect, he would find that interesting. So I said, okay, great. This is the most feedback I've ever got from him. He runs the show. Let me go create this character. So I went off and I created the character. I created the backstory. I created the look, the design, why he would say this, what his motivation is, all that stuff. I bundled it all up. I recorded a video. I made a presentation. I sent it all to either Vince or Johnny Ace or somebody. And I basically heard nothing back. And I was like, well, okay, I tried. I mean, that's what a lot of my main roster run under T-Bar was okay, I tried, and that's all. I never looked back on any second of my WWE run with a regret because I tried so much. As I said in the letter, I pitched everything to anyone who would listen endlessly. And I even did it in a fashion where I wasn't just like bombarding them with stuff. I wasn't like emailing Vince like 3 times a week or texting Hunter like 47 times like I talked to these guys maybe like enough where it was like I need to keep myself on their radar. So, like one message every 3 or 4 months or something like that, just like hey, just checking in, or hey, what can I do? Or I'd see them in person, be like, oh, I just wanted to see what, I wanted to be heard in some capacity just because I needed to try. So yeah, that came and went. It didn't happen. Finally, fast forward a little bit and I find out I'm going down to NXT. Perfect. I watch NXT. I'm aware of NXT 2.0. I know of the character shift. I know that they're shifting into this white and gold era where they're trying to put a little more emphasis on in-ring stuff. I'm like, I can be the perfect bridge for this. And this is exactly how I presented it. I gave them the exact presentation that I gave to Vince. I recorded a brand new video that showed even more of how I felt this could be presented on NXT. And I told them, I think I can be an amazing gap for you between 2.0 and the new white and gold. I think I can bring the in-ring and I can elevate everybody else in terms of the in-ring, but I can also meet that standard of character and presentation that you guys have now established through the 2.0 thing. And I gave them the whole presentation. They knew that I had made lots of presentations before, none of them had gone anywhere. So they know that my guard is way up in terms of this process. And they just tell me straight up, they're like, we know you've done these before. We know you have a ton of concern, and it's rightfully deserved concern. We just want to let you know that we want to work with you and we want to listen to you and we love this idea. And I was like, okay, I've heard that before. I don't know. I know you guys and I love you guys, but at the end of the day, this is WWE, and I don't know what's going to happen or what plans are going to change or anything like that. So I'm like, thank you so much for this opportunity. Go home and just hope and pray that it happens. That's what always happens. So I go home, and it's been 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Shame on me for hoping and for hoping again. Shame on me. At least I still have a job. That's what it always boiled down to. At the end of the day was, at least I still have a job. And then they call me and they're like, hey, do you still have the T-bar mask? And I was like, here we go. Like, no, we want you to send it down because we're going to burn it for a vignette on Halloween Havoc. And I was like, it's already in the mail. Like you had it yesterday. And I sent it to them. They burnt it. And then the next week we were doing the vignettes. And I'm telling you, the presentation on NXT was exactly what I pitched. Like exactly what I pitched. The visual, the verbiage, everything looked exactly how I wanted it to. The entrance, the music, it was all perfect. And I was so happy and so thankful for that from that point on, I was basically committed to doing literally whatever they asked me to do. Not that I wasn't before, but like I was like gung ho, like no, yeah. I need to do it exactly this way and make it work. And it needs to be the best because I need to show them how thankful I am. And honestly, it's pretty much what I did for the whole run, minus a few points at the end of the run where I started to gamble on myself a little bit more, just in terms of like, okay, we've been saying the same verbiage for a year, and I know if I ask to say stuff like this, or if I ask to do a move like this, it might not get approved. So I would just gamble on myself and just say it and do it and deal with the repercussions after. I only did that like 2 or 3 times. And quite frankly, that's not, it probably sounds worse on paper. Like, what do you mean you did whatever? No wonder that the people who are looking for a reason for me to not be in WWE anymore will point at that. I promise you, those are not the reasons that I'm not. Nobody. That's the kind of thing where you get told in the back, like, hey, please stick to your lines. Hey, run those moves by us, but cool move. I'll give you.
You're talking about the shaft line.
What's that?
The shaft line.
100%. And the moonsault off the top of the cage. Those are the two. Really, honestly, probably the only 2 times where I just didn't clear something. Both times, I wasn't like yelled at in the back, but like there was a clear, like, hey, they need to cover themselves, right? They need to be like, oh, if he doesn't clear things by us, we need to make sure everybody knows that because you can't have everybody doing that, or the inmates are running the asylum and the whole place falls apart. So you need to save face. That being said, I know that they like this stuff because everybody liked the stuff, right? I was kind of very vague the whole day, where I knew I was jumping off the top of the cage, and I was like, yeah, and I'll do a moonsault here, and I'll do this, and I was just kind of like, I was like, hey, by the way, Joe, I'm jumping off the top if that's okay with you. And he's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, if anyone asks, just blame me. Like, it's 100%. He's like, okay, I don't care. So I did it. And then I got to the back, and they were like, hey, man, you got to run stuff like that by us. Like, that absolutely should have been the finish. And I was like, yeah, I know. But like, if I told you, if it were the finish, I would have had to tell you. And if I told you, I'm almost positive you would have said no. And they were like, yeah, we probably would have said no. And I was like, okay, well, at least we're all on the same page, right? Because the responsibility falls on them, right? If I say I'm going to jump off the top of the cage, and they go, absolutely, sounds good, and then I land on Joe Gacy's face and break his face, that becomes their responsibility because they greenlit it, right? So I understand the process of oversight and not wanting to approve things, right? If I ad lib a line, or if I ask them if I can say, hey, can I say the shaft line? And they're like, absolutely. And then the network is like, who approved this line? And then they have to admit to it. That comes back on them, right? So a lot of the time, and everyone's heard this before, ask for forgiveness instead of permission. sometimes you have to do that. That's not this out of the box concept that never happens in WWE. Trust me, it happens all the time. I can't say with certainty that that's not the reason they didn't renew my contract, because at the end of the day, I don't know. I never got an answer for that. I would be very, very surprised if that was the reason. And quite frankly, if that's the reason, it would help me sleep a lot better at night, because if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't have changed a thing. If I knew ultimately that that was the reason, that they weren't going to renew my contract, I'd say, okay, I don't want to be here, because I don't want to be in a place that limits you and stifles you that much, to that degree, where if you even take a chance on yourself, your contract is not going to be renewed. I don't want to be part of that. That being said, I don't think that was the reason.
No, I don't think so either myself, personally.
But that being said, it could be, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's at the end of the day, let's call a spade a spade. It's probably 3 or 4 guys sitting in a room just making a decision. Again, I don't know. I'm not part of that process, and I never got an explanation. But an educated guess would be it's 3 or 4 guys just sitting in a room and just deciding. And who knows what their protocol is? I have no idea. It could be literally anything. That's the thing about human beings, is you don't know what another human being is thinking. They might just not like my gear. Like, I don't know. You genuinely don't know. It could be anything. So I hate to even speculate or guess. That's why I give that context and that precursor to almost everything I say about that. Is at the end of the day, this is all subjective, and it's literally just guesswork. And the reality is, I don't know.
So you talk about, them not renewing your deal. So before you're notified of that, when did you get that feeling that you were not getting a new deal? Or did you always I know you've said in the past in other interviews, you had your representation kind of telling you, they're just pushing it down the line and stuff like that. You also discussed how you were had that feeling of, you have 1 month left when you were drafted, called up to Raw in the draft this year. When did that first feeling that you had, like, well, this is like the closest that they've gotten to the expiration. Now I'm thinking about what can happen now.
Yeah. Honestly, the thought never even crossed my mind up until the first night of the draft. It never even crossed my mind, not for 1 second. I thought I was in the best position. Everybody was so happy with me. I knew that I had 2 options. Either I was going to stay in NXT, and my NXT run was going so well that would be a good thing for me, or I'd get drafted and I knew who was in charge of the main roster, and I knew that they were familiar with my work and all those things. So that would be a good avenue for me. So I thought I was in the best possible spot. And I wasn't concerned about my contract coming up in a month, because I had talked with other guys, and I had talked with Damian Priest, who it had come out about his contract coming close to the end, and I knew Seth had come close. So I was like, oh, okay, this is just what they're doing. They're letting guys' contracts come closer to the end, and then they're starting negotiations. Okay, that's fine. That's their strategy. I have representation. We'll find out. I'm in a great spot right now. Everyone's super happy. We're coming right off the heels of Stand and Deliver. This couldn't be going better, right? In terms of how it's gone. Then the first night of the draft happens, and that was my first. And again, it's just a series of a little bit, like just a little seed gets planted. It's like, oh, that's interesting, and then it becomes a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, until finally, basically the day before we reached out for the 3rd time, and I was finally notified. The day before that, I was like, this could go either way. It really genuinely felt to me like it was just a coin flip. Like, they'll either lowball me or they'll make no offer at all. That's 100% how I felt on that day. And we ended up getting the no offer at all. Because I just got a series of indicators over the course of time, which is difficult to understand. I get it without the full context of my full WWE career, but just I'll say this much. When I saw how night 1 of the draft went, which we were all there, I was already in Orlando because I was vacationing at Disney World with my family, and I just drove over to the PC, and I sat there, and we did the whole thing, and people were getting announced. Just the way that it all went down. Again, it had nothing to do with me, but just the way that I saw NXT being announced and how many there were. I've just been there long enough. I've been part of the draft process multiple times. I understand how this hierarchy works and things like that. And I saw how many people were on the depth chart ahead of me, right? Because I'm not unobservant. I know who's been a champion. I know who's been on TV more than I know all those things. So I'm just watching it, and I see that there's like 4 or 5 people from NXT drafted throughout the course of the night, and I'm like, that wasn't as many people from NXT as I expected. I was hoping that these people would all be off the board by the time Monday rolled around. Or I was hoping I'd be drafted that night, right? Like if I got drafted in the 4th round, great, here I go, I'm on. But I didn't get drafted, okay, fine. There's another night of draft, who cares? And I know that some people aren't eligible and whatever, not a big deal. What became a little bit concerning was how few people from NXT were drafted that first night, because it was like, oh, I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing a bunch of guys who are for sure going to get drafted before me, right? Like Ilya was still on the board. There's a few other examples of people who needed to be drafted before me, and I was like, that's a cause for concern, because I know now they've set the precedent that there's not a ton of NXT people being inserted in this draft thing. And now I know that there's a bunch of people that need to go before me. So now I'm starting to get concerned. And now now that later on in that night, they announced the supplemental draft, and I'm like, ooh, now they're including, I think Corbin, for example, was drafted in the supplemental draft on the first night. So that was the first time where I was like, uh-oh, because Corbin and me are like, again, he's ahead of me on the depth chart, right? So when I look at him and I see him in this, because this is a guy he beat Kurt Angle at WrestleMania, right? So like I'm not going to pretend that I'm ahead of him on the depth chart. I'm just looking at it and being like, that's a concerning thing. If they're putting Corbin in the supplemental draft, that makes me feel like I'm going to be in the supplemental draft. And if I'm in the supplemental draft with my contract coming up in a month, that's a cause for concern. Turns out, I mean, long story short, all of that happened. Everybody, you can go watch it. You can go watch it on YouTube if you want. That's exactly it's exactly how it happened. The announcement happened, and again, that was an indicator. And then the next week on Raw, I show up and I'm not listed. Another indicator, and I just got a series of indicators. I'm on main event. That was another indicator. And look, on other interviews, I've been like, I got these. One of these things happened, and it felt like a death sentence, right? And everybody took that quote and ran with it, because they were like, "Oh, you think main event's a death sentence? Well, you're just ungrateful. You don't belong there." No, I don't think main event's a death sentence. I think that me, in that situation at that time, knowing all these other things that had happened with my contract coming up, at that moment when I got the text message and I read it, it felt like me to a death sentence. That's how I felt. I'm not wrong for feeling that right way. And quite frankly, I wasn't wrong at all, because my career died. So I ended up being right about that. So to criticize me for that is again, this is what happens when you rip a quote out of the context and just aggregate it and just put it there next to my angry face, and everybody looks at it and they think that I'm just tweeting like into the oblivion that main event is a death sentence. And then they show me like 100 people who climbed out of the main event spot. And I'm like, I know, I was on main event for a very, very, very long time. I know that people were on main event. LA Knight was on main event. There's tons of main eventers who were on main event. So you don't have to convince me. I'm more aware of main event than all of you. I lived main event. So you don't. So it's just funny stuff like that I say funny, but honestly, when I read stuff like that, it hurts. It hurts to think that people think that I'm selfish or disrespectful, or that I don't, because that it makes it easier to accept what happened to me if I'm a bad employee. It just does. Because if you look at the field and you say, why did they get rid of him? If something pops up that says, oh, and the other thing that they did is they said I was leaking to the dirt sheets. I was not leaking to the dirt sheets. Someone misinterpreted what I said on my own stream about talking to Sean a few hours before that. And they heard, oh, he said he's talking to Sean. Blah, blah. And then someone made a post on Reddit. Somebody screenshot that and put it on Twitter. And all of a sudden everybody buys into it, because that makes it easier to swallow. It makes it an easier pill to swallow. If if my favorite basketball player gets released from the team, if Tom Brady got released from the team, and I'm like, Patriots, what are you doing? Why did you release Tom Brady? Why would you do that? He's a great player. What is wrong with you? And now it's like, I don't want to watch the Patriots anymore. That's my favorite team, but and then something comes out that's like, Tom Brady punched Bill Belichick in the face. Then you go, oh, that's why they got rid of Tom Brady. Now it makes sense. Tom Brady didn't deserve to be. Why is he punching the head coach in the face? Come on, Tom. You got to make better decisions, man. Go Patriots. Come on. That's a real human thing that makes you feel better about being a fan and consuming the product. So I get it. I get why people are actively searching for stuff like that. Here's the bottom line. Nobody actively searched for that answer more than me. I promise you, nobody searched for that answer more than me. I texted, I called, I asked, I begged, I pleaded. This is my life, okay? I lived this life. I wanted answers more than all of you combined. I promise I wanted answers. The reality is there wasn't one. They didn't give me one. I'm sure there was one in reality. No one will ever know what it was until whoever made those decisions decides to announce it. And if they weren't going to tell me, I don't think they're going to tell anyone. That's just the truth. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. We do have a super chat donation here from Chilling with Chase. Thank you so much, Chase, for the super chat donation. He says, did you know who was going to be the leader of Retribution all along, or was it just random? Anyone that you thought it was going to be before, of course, Mustafa Ali was revealed as the leader of Retribution?
We all found out that day that it was going to be Ali, including himself. He like a writer or a producer came over to us like, yeah, we're gonna reveal Ali as your leader. We're like, okay. We saw someone talking to him and he came over and he talked to us. He's like, hey guys, I guess I'm the leader of Retribution. And we started a whole dialogue there. None of us were told anything any further than that in advance. I heard a rumor that before that it was supposed to be Finn Balor, but he was doing something. I think the timing was off because he was slated to go down to NXT to become the NXT champion to help them out in some capacity. So I don't know whether that's true or not, but I was told at least that was a pitch, I guess. And again, pitches, the word pitch and the word plan gets thrown around a lot in WWE. There's a lot of pitches and there's a lot of plans. They don't always happen. In fact, more often than not, they don't happen. I think fans hear the word plan and they go, oh, that's the plan. That's happening. It's especially maybe under Hunter, if there's a plan in place, like it that's what's in store. Under Vince, the plans could change like yeah, because he got a bad night of sleep, right? Like it could be anything. So to hear that there was a plan and a pitch and whatever, that means almost nothing in that era. But yeah, that's kind of what I heard. We had, again, here's the word, we had pitched. I pitched like Vince himself. I pitched Shane McMahon. I pitched who else? We had like a list at one point because we just wanted like basically I was just listing like the most important people I could think of because I wanted Vince to like love this this story. I wanted him to look at it and be like, oh, that's I'm in it. It's the most important story. Oh, Shane's in it. It's got to be important, It's and I was pitching like the WWE champion and stuff. Like whoever was most important and whoever had to be on TV. I'm like, I want that to be our leader. They went with Ali. So again, and frankly, I doubt he wanted to do it as much because it's like we were all in masks, so that was embarrassing. And but he wasn't, he was just himself. So that in a different way is embarrassing. So it's, it just ended up again, not because I nobody thinks higher of Mustafa Ali than me, right? Endlessly, everyone in that group gave everything that they had, and I've never seen 5 people work harder for less benefit ever in the history of my experience in WWE. I've just never seen it. We were working tirelessly. We were texting each other endlessly. We were talking. We were conversing. We were pitching stuff to Vince. We were pitching stuff to our writers. We're constantly trying to take what we were given, which was horrible, and make it just bad and presentable on TV. And that, so we worked our asses off to try to do that. So I have all the respect in the world for everybody else in that group. I think they're some of the best professional wrestlers in the world. And I think that stable, had we been allowed to do our vision, would have been an all-time stable. I really believe that. But the reality is we did Vince's vision instead.
I have a special Retribution question. It might be the most important Retribution-based question you've gotten on any of these interviews.
Okay.
Why did the original people that were behind the mask throw a cinder block into a broken window?
I'll give you the exact reason why, because they weren't wrestlers. They were writers. They just didn't have enough warm bodies. They had I think this was at a time where we either couldn't have extras. No, we could have extras because they hadn't fully upped the COVID restrictions yet to get rid of extras. So there were extras there, but there was only normal protocols, 3 or 4 extras. And they needed 20 people for Retribution. So they just looked around and said, we don't have enough human beings to do this. So they grabbed writers, and some of those people in the masks were writers. That's why you're super unathletic looking throws of Molotov cocktails and really weird decisions and bad spray painting and dude who doesn't know how to use a chainsaw and people celebrating like children. They just weren't wrestlers. They weren't workers. And so I'm not angry at them, right? They were just imagine if you worked at, I don't know, if you were if you were a guy who cuts trees and all of a sudden your boss was like, you're painting a house today, and you're like, what? You're just trying. I don't know, this is what a house kind of looks like. So you wouldn't be mad at the tree chopping guy because he painted the house all crappy. You just say, all right, did his best. That's what they did. They did their best. And that's when I swooped in and I was like, hey, sir, I'm a wrestler and I got some wrestler friends and I think we can do this better. And we did for a little bit until he did what he did.
Of course. Yeah. We got another super chat donation here from Chilla with Chase once again. Thank you, Chase. He says, what's your personal favorite match that you had in the WWE?
Yeah, that would be the Iron Survivor Challenge match from Deadline. Just I guess it's probably only about 7 months ago at this point. Just 8 months, I guess. Time flies. Yeah, that's my personal favorite match. Just everything about it was so unique, and it was easy to put together, but difficult all at the same time because of the guys I was working with, and they all had so many ideas and they wanted to make this work, and they were all in on the concept that we'd come up with and all this different stuff, but difficult because of the parameters of the match. This guy has to leave for 1 minute and and then this guy, the pinfall, we got to match up all the numbers. And at the end, it has to be exactly this. And you have to get the timing exactly right. I've never been more nervous for a match in my entire life. My heart was beating out of my chest. And there's nothing in professional wrestling that makes me nervous anymore, right? I walk out in front of the stage. I could do this stuff blindfolded. That match gave me such nerves because it had to be exact. And we designed it in a manner where I was literally hands-on in control for the final 90 seconds of it in terms of the timing to get to the final sequence of spots. So it had to be perfect, and I would initiate that part of it, and it had to be timed perfectly. This is, for anybody who remembers the match, this is the part where I come in behind Briggs, and I pick Briggs up, and then I drop him with whatever, and then Trick floats in, and then I hit Trick with my finish. Eddie Thorpe comes from out of the ring. He pulls the ref. He comes up on the apron. I stand up at Eddie. Eddie hits my head off, kicks me into the thing, and then I get rolled up by Trick 1, 2, 3. All of that had to happen exactly at the time that we had set for the rest of the whole stuff, with Tyler coming off the top and the hook and the double leg and the thing. All of that to even out the score for Trick so that they could get to that final spot with Braun where he hits his finish on Braun with 5 seconds left, right? Because we wanted it exactly at the buzzer. My whole concept going into it was, how do we make Trick the biggest underdog humanly possible and then have him come crashing all the way back in the least amount of time and give him this shocking out of nowhere victory? Because when I see a match like that, I say, ooh, how can we exploit it for all it's worth? How can I get the most possible out of this match? And what we did was exactly that. And I'm so proud of that match. I'm so happy with the way that it went off. It's 100% my number one match ever. My number two match ever is myself, Keith Lee, and Roderick Strong, triple threat for the North American Championship. And it's and then I got a bunch more that are right behind that, between the triple threat at Stand and Deliver, me and Keith at Portland, or me and Ilya at Battleground, me and Wes at Vengeance. Right, the list goes on for me. There's just so many of my favorites. I'm so proud of all of them, and a lot of them came in that last chunk of time, and I'm just so proud of that run. And I'm so thankful for that run. Right, without that, I'd be completely lost on the independent scene. So I'm super happy and thankful for all of that and the way that it turned out.
What a list of great matches. And that the Iron Survivor matchup, I remember that we did a review on the channel, and I said that's the closest thing in wrestling to a game winner in a basketball game.
Right, exactly.
Like,
yeah,
that
right.
was what it was, 100%.
I thought, man, there's such an opportunity here with the time. And then when I saw at the end, because they didn't tell us this, when I saw at the end, I think the first time I saw it was in the rehearsal right before, which, by the way, every rehearsal we did went overtime, and we were like, well, that ruins the whole thing. The whole thing's right. So we didn't get it right until the time you guys saw on TV. But during the rehearsal, we were getting to that end part, and the lights started flashing red, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. The lights are gonna be flashing red, and everyone's tied at 3, and the two guys are standing in the ring, and you don't know what's gonna happen. I'm like, this is the coolest finish to a match ever in the history of WWE. And it was exactly how I envisioned it. It was so perfect.
1000%. We got another super chat donation from Power Driver Finisher. Thank you so much. He says, just for the interview, we appreciate that. And I wanted to ask you one final question here, or
Sure.
as we wrap things up here. So you got so many people is looking forward to what you're doing next. You know, you've already made your first appearance on the independent scene, had your first matchup for Beyond Wrestling. I wrote an article today for Wrestle Talk about you and Mustafa Ali going one-on-one with Winnipeg Pro Wrestling. So outside of the people that you're already booked to face, I know you're facing Michael Oku for in the UK for Rev Pro as well. What are some of the talents you're personally looking to possibly work with the most now that you are out of WWE and can kind of explore the entire spectrum of wrestling?
Yeah, so I get asked this question a few times, and it's a little difficult for me to formulate an answer because I'm not tremendously familiar with the independent scene. Right, I've been out of it for 7 years, whereas my first run in NXT, for example, I was much more familiar. Now I'm at the point where almost everybody I know or wrestled is signed in some capacity to some company, so I'm not tremendously familiar with the field. That being said, I do know a few guys. Conan Lycan comes to mind. He's a guy that I know who works for AEW. I'm familiar with his work just because he and I have had a discourse where we've talked about back and forth. Shane Mercer's a guy who pops up in my just when I'm scrolling Instagram or whatever. It's the kind of thing that's like, oh, that's so he's there. I mean, all the guys that I am wrestling are obviously, huge opportunities for me, and I end up looking into them more, and I've heard of them, but I haven't necessarily seen their matches. So I watch more of their matches once I hear that we're wrestling, and I'm super excited for all of it. My friend Anthony Green, who's a tag team champion in Noah, will be coming back to the States. So I've already lined some stuff up where hopefully I get to wrestle him again, because it's been, oh God, probably 8 years since we wrestled, which is, I see how good he is now, and I want to be part of that. So yeah, that's pretty much most of my list, because other than that, I'm just kind of generally unfamiliar. But I'm going to be on a lot of shows all over the place coming up, so I'm going to get very familiar with guys very quickly. And again, remember, there's a lot of these guys at the top of the indies right now who have already wrestled, right? So it's not like a dream match per se. It's just like Joey. I was on a show with Joey Janela the other day. He and I have wrestled a bunch of times, so that's not a dream match for me. I'd love to wrestle him again. It's been a long time, but that's not like you know.
Well, who are some of the talents who may be signed or on the independent scene that you would like to face, even if you've already faced them before? Because I know in a previous interview you've let it be known, or it was also reported, and you put it out on social media. You were backstage at Forbidden Door. You made it aware that you said Tony Khan is aware of your interest in AEW. So anywhere in the wrestling world, you tagged New Japan and TNA. Who are the talents you want to face or work with?
Josh Alexander's always been on my list. He was on my list way back when I was wrestling for the new NXT champion, Ethan Page, in Alpha One in Canada. We were always on the same show, but we never got the matchup. I always wanted that one. I mean, there's a million more guys. That's why, in terms of like first time matchups, like I never got to wrestle Kenny Omega. I never got to wrestle Will Ospreay. I never got to wrestle Okada. I mean, there's a million names that come to mind of guys who are in these companies. So of course, if I understand there's like contract restrictions and maybe I have to work for those companies and whatever it may be. So I'm not going to continuously just throw out a bunch of names, right? Because I want to wrestle Randy Orton too, and that's probably not happening anytime soon. So if ever, and that's kind of disappointing. That being said, I did wrestle Randy a little bit, just like in like a tag team, but like I'd love like a singles match with him. That's all over the spectrum, though. You know, there's guys that I've wrestled before that I haven't wrestled in 7 years, and I want to wrestle them again. There's guys that I've never wrestled that I'd love to. I just love the experience, and I love that I'm in a position now where it feels like I can do more of that than, you know, when I was with WWE. And the reality with WWE is like you wrestle a lot of the same guys just over and over and over again. That's just kind of the way that it boils down, right? So it's there was a point in my career where Keith and I were sick of wrestling each other. Now we're at the point where it's like we should probably main event a pay-per-view with this in some capacity. So hopefully that happens wherever that might happen.
I am as a personal fan of yours. Like I've said this entire interview, I'm chopping at the bit for you and Keith Lee again, because
Right.
that
Me
is
too.
like the thing that really got me into both of you guys. You guys just going at it and going crazy and seeing two guys your size do things that I didn't think were possible in NXT, PWG, Evolve, wherever you've worked. You guys are amazing together, in my
Thank you so much. I think he and I feel the same
opinion. We have one final super chat donation as we wrap things up here. Chilling with Chase. Thank you once again. He says, I saw on Mace's stream how you break down matches. I love how you prepare matches, adding in how crowds react. Does city and time your match goes on effect on how you plan it? Like the city that you're in, the time that you have, how does it affect how you plan out and lay out these matches?
Yeah. Time way more so than city. I assume. I mean, time could go in a number of directions. That like you could mean time like as in time of day, which can play a factor. Yes, the time of day, like if it's a morning show as opposed to a late at night show or somewhere in between, that can play a factor. And it's not the kind of thing where you actively sit down and you're like, this is a morning show. I need to, I need to do loud noises to wake the crowd up. It's nothing like that, but it's like you're internally processing a lot of different things all at the same time. Time as in length of match, though, that's much more vital, right? It's that's you need to give that heavy consideration when you're preparing a match, especially if it's a television match or a premium live event. Now we're talking about no, you have to hit your time, right? TV more so than premium live event. If you go a minute over on TV, it's like, hey, please don't do that again. Like that was a big mistake. You're taking someone else's time. That's like a big no. That being said, the further up the card you are, the less anybody cares. So it's like if The Rock goes 5 minutes over, everyone's like, oh, rewrite the show, it's whatever. Premium live event, you get a little more flexibility, but still they're like stick to your time. So the only way you can get away with it is if you're having a really killer match. So yeah, that plays a huge factor because if I have to design my match, and I've done enough matches where I know how long most things take and I can time it out. And sometimes we walk through it in advance and you just know pretty much down to like the second how long everything is going to take. So that's a critical element. City, it's in there, right? Like I know how the North reacts to something, or the Northeast reacts to something, as opposed to the Carolinas, and then the Midwest, and then the Florida area, and then California and the Pacific Northwest. I understand that there's different variances depending on geographically where we are. If we're over in Europe, or I've never wrestled in Japan, so I don't have that experience yet, but I've watched enough Japanese wrestling to have a general idea of the cadence and timing and things like that. So yeah, it plays a role. I would say less so though in like the preparation of match, and more so in terms of the execution of the match, right? Like I can tell when I'm listening to a crowd, and then what the reaction is, and then I can quickly process like, oh, here's where we are geographically, and here's how this cadence goes, and now I can feed off of that, right? Because like Europe's the easiest example, right? Because if I'm doing something and they start to come up with a singing like football soccer chant, then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we need to ride this out. I'm not going to interrupt them with that. I'm gonna parlay it into something else, see if I can escalate the thing and get them even more invested into what we're doing and feed off of that. So all of that plays a role into what's going on in the execution, less so in the preparation, because it's not like, and here they'll start their soccer chant. Like, I don't know when they're gonna start their soccer chant. I can't, the best wrestler in the world can't predict that stuff. So it's geography plays more of a role in execution as opposed to preparation, if that helps.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand that. And I want to just say this has been so much fun to be able to chat with you. I have a quick one here
Sure.
from said they want to see Konosuke Takeshita against Dijak. That would be great. And I agree, that would be awesome. But you gave me so much to think about and talk about. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out and with me today to do this interview. And I want to give you the opportunity, the floor, to let everybody know where they can follow you on social media and plug some of your many independent bookings that you've already have announced across the independent scene, if you will. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Everything is still at Dijak WWE. People are giving me crap for that. I don't know why. Like I just I just don't feel like switching all of it right now. It's just easier. It's what it has been for a long time. That's how people know me. So I'm just gonna, rather than try to screw it all up and people won't know where to find me and whatever, I'm just gonna wait until I have something more definitive to change it to. So sorry if that makes you angry, but you should. Uh, if that's what's making you mad in life, then I guess you probably have a pretty good life. At Dijak WWE for almost everything. If you're a promoter, you want to schedule an interview or anything, it's the same email address, or not at, just bookdijak@gmail.com. You can reach me there if you want to book me for pretty much anything. Other than that, yeah, I'm just this weekend I have a couple of shows. I don't even remember what I'm announced for. I think I'm announced for both. One's in the Pittsburgh area for a company called Rise. The other one's in the Quebec area. Yeah, just keep your eyes peeled on my social medias. I'll give you all the details for those if you're in that area. Or you can just kind of Google it or whatever, and you'll probably find it pretty quickly.
Yes, for sure. I will be supporting you. And I hope everyone watching this interview is supporting him. Go out of your way to follow him. Go to your local independent if he's going to be there, because this guy knows his wrestling and he's one of the best wrestlers in the world. So, and we have a streak of everybody who comes on here usually gets big money contracts. So let's get him some big money
Ooh.
contracts out here. So. But
honestly, not my number one goal at this point, right? Like
okay.
If somebody throws a life-changing amount of money at me, then I'll trust that they have their creative ducks in a row. but outside of that, if it's just a company that wants to talk with me and negotiate a contract, I'm happy to do that. But in terms of what I need in terms of a contract, I just need that exact conversation I told you about way back at the beginning that I wanted to have with WWE. I need to have that conversation with anybody, because right now I can't just.
Oh, I think we lost him. He cut out here. Maybe the phone died. But yes, I had so much fun. I don't know about you guys, but greatly appreciate Dijak for coming on here. I'll give him a couple of seconds here if it's not his phone died and it just cut off for a bit here. But I'll give my plugs while we see if he comes back or not. You can follow me on the Twitter machine at TrueHillSP3. You can follow the game Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at True Hill Heat, patreon.com/True Hill Heat, $3 a month gets you exclusive content, the True Hill Heat Prediction Championship, and all that good stuff. And check out all the great stuff we got on the channel right now, like the flagship podcast, True Hill Heat 284 from this past Saturday. You can also check out our WWE Money in the Bank 2024 review, where we break down the huge card from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Money in the Bank from this past Saturday. But yes, thank you guys so much for joining us live. This is our first time experiencing a live exclusive interview, so hopefully it won't be the last. And I appreciate all the great support that you guys gave in the chat. All your comments and the super chat donations are greatly appreciated. But this has been True Heels BTR Between the Ropes. If Dijak does come back on here, I'll give y'all an exclusive at patreon.com/True Hill Heat, or maybe I'll put something up on our members page. But this has been True Heels BTR Between the Ropes, an exclusive interview with the one and only Donovan Dijak. Thank you so much, guys. We appreciate y'all for joining us live. Appreciate y'all. If you're watching us on demand, drop the thumbs up, comment down below, and let us know what you thought of this exclusive interview. So until next time, we're signing off. Later, y'all.